everyone, it's Raina. So this video is looking at the full moon in Cancer, which is occurring on December 26th, and my time zone is Central Time Zone in the Midwest in the USA, and it is occurring here at 6:34 p.m. So if you are in the UK, I believe you're 6 hours ahead of me, and down under, well, all of us, Europe and also Australia, it will be on the 27th for you guys. And this is the last full moon of the year. And one of the interesting things about this is the United States is a Cancerian country. I don't know any other countries that are also Cancerian. And when Pluto went into Aquarius, this was the sign that Pluto was in at the time of the American Revolution in the late 1700s. Okay, so well over 200 years ago. And Pluto currently is still in Capricorn, although it's direct now. And at the time of this full moon, Pluto is at the 29th degree of Capricorn, which is the critical degree of any sign. It's the last degree, and it kind of is the sum of all of that transit. Or if you're talking about something in your natal chart, it's the sum of that sign and whatever the planet it is in. It just kind of really incorporates the lessons of that particular sign or that transit. So, and we are going to have another period of time in the latter part of 2024 where Pluto goes back into Capricorn. So this is not the only time it's going to go back there. And so we're going to have more lessons to learn. And I'm talking about the United States in particular, but the collective, the world as a whole. And I say the United States because, it's the United States, I believe, is the degree of the sun in Cancer is it's probably about 14 degrees or so. So it wouldn't really aspect that at such a late degree. So maybe that's not going to impact the United States in particular, but the world as a whole, because Capricorn represents all of these institutions that are, the structures of our society. And, but anyway, there was some kind of news that came out in the past week. I'm recording this on the 23rd of December, and this was, before the solstice for sure. And it was about some information that's coming out right after the new year. And I'm not going to go there because I don't know the censorship issues and things like that. If you mention names, if they just completely try to block you or anything like that. So I'm going to just say news that could be very damaging to people in positions of power and people who are very famous and things like that. And this is going to occur in the United States. This is the court system in the United States. So even though the full moon is at 4 degrees and 58 minutes, basically 5 degrees of Cancer, and is not really aspecting the sun, of the United States, it is in the same sign, and it does represent certain things for the United States. So that was the first thing I thought about, because anytime there's a full moon, you can have some kind of things that are revealed that were hidden before. And it's like that shadow side that kind of comes to light because the sun and the moon are in conjunction. So they bring the light and the reflection of the light in alignment. So let's just talk about some of the aspects that are happening here and some of the planets and the signs. At this time, obviously the sun and moon are in opposition, as always occurs, but the sun is in conjunction with Mercury and the moon is opposing Mercury. So, really, that's very interesting because this is like the sun. The first word that came to my mind when I said that sentence about the sun in conjunction with Mercury, I thought of destiny. You know, the moon to me is more of our karma, our karmic baggage, our what we bring, our reactions, our memories, and things like that, our emotional imprints. And it's the past, you know. And to me, the sun is the future. So, with a hard angle between the moon and Mercury, some news, which Mercury can represent, communications, what have you, can be kind of rejected by the person's emotional nature, but they align with the sun. That's the kind of thing where what is best for us isn't always emotionally easy. What is meant for our evolution isn't always easy for us to take emotionally. And this is also evidenced, although the sun is challenged in this particular case that I'm going to cite, by squares from the Sun, Moon, and Mercury and Mars to Neptune. Neptune is the planet that deals in illusions, delusions, but also the opposite, disillusionment. You know, somebody who is feeling a sense of, their dreams being ripped from them can sometimes occur too. But first, they are under that spell, and that is Neptune. And so the sun squaring Neptune can be that what the person wants to achieve is very murky, is very cloudy or foggy, and maybe the person isn't being realistic in how they're going about something. Well, when I read these kinds of things for the collective, it's you know, people have certain dreams for themselves based on what has happened to us in the past few years, and a lot of those dreams have changed. Um, a lot of people there have been a lot of spiritual awakenings, according to what I have heard from others, as well as just the nature of spiritual teachers kind of talking about what they have intuited has occurred because of the extreme nature of our lives. And because of that, the goals that people have been kind of cast aside because they no longer seem to fit. And even people, there were people that tried to just kind of press on and keep their life as much as it was before as they could. But there have been things that have sidelined people. Some of them maybe like that, trying to just say, nothing to see here, or this is just one more obstacle that I have to surmount. And I mean, that's a great attitude to take about not letting things stop you. But on the other hand, if people can't see that life is never going to go back to the way it used to be, then that is problematic because there will be things that maybe choices that they made early on that come back to bite them because they wanted to keep things as they were. And um, it's all, ultimately, it's all a lesson. Whatever happens to us, We are we are eternal beings, so it doesn't matter. It's like people are afraid that if they make this, a wrong choice, that then everything completely collapses, and that's not true. Even though sometimes it looks that way on the surface, it really isn't true. So, yeah, so there's some kind of blockage between what somebody envisioned for their life, or what we have envisioned as a collective, and what has transpired. And that can affect a person's, you know, sense of, sometimes their sense of hopefulness, because they can feel that, things will never transpire the way that they want to. And they always say it's darkest before the dawn. So people have to remember that if they feel discouraged about something that they have wanted to happen, and especially at the end of the year, and this particular full moon, because it's in Cancer, is very emotional, and it's also very tied to the past. So there can be this, like, why did I do that? Uh, why isn't this person in my life? Or, why did this relationship, you know, crumble? And not seeing that there is a higher value in that, and maybe the person just needs to hang on, and they will eventually see why that had to happen that way. So expect people to be very emotional in general. And maybe, if you know people, if you are connected to somebody who has a natural tendency towards being very dramatic, or, well, it's not so much dramatic, that I think a Leo with that, but more, um, what's that word, like a drama queen, about emotions. Like they tend to exaggerate their emotions and play them up. Yes, I'm talking about Sun and Cancer people. You guys are going to have a field day probably, or Moon and Cancer people. But yeah, realize that they're coming from a temporary influence that they are particularly susceptible to, and will probably pass. This too shall pass. So Mercury is in Sagittarius. That's the interesting thing. Sag is the truth teller. Sag is the seer, the sage. Sag is a sage, and the sage is the prophet. The sage is the person who is seeing what is really happening, and they are telling they're telling the people that need to be awakened what is really happening. Now, it's interesting about that opposition I was mentioning with the moon, because the moon is actually in Cancer. This is an example of how oppositions don't always happen with opposite signs. It just so happens that um, the moon is at an early degree of Cancer, so it's considered close enough to be opposing that 23 degrees of Sag. But you know what? That makes me think that, scratch that. I can just look and I see that. I was going to say, maybe the sun does oppose Capricorn at this time, but it doesn't. Um, as a matter of fact, yeah, it should square it, actually, because it's so close to Capricorn. Is so close to, no, I'm sorry. It's close to, I was thinking I was looking at the wrong line. Um, so forget what I just said. Yeah, so with the moon squaring Neptune, this is where it really comes in, where something may be going on that feels very disillusioning. Now, I'm recording this before Christmas, and even if you don't celebrate Christmas, you probably celebrate holidays. Even if you're an atheist, you probably get together with family at that particular time around December 25th or 24th or something like that. Maybe you don't. And maybe some people don't even see their families. I know some people don't. But in any case, I think like the day after Christmas, there always is that kind of letdown, or for the people who really get into it big time. But there could be some other reason for this, and it might be some kind of an event that occurs. I mean, I hope it's nothing catastrophic. I'm looking here in terms of things that are going on. It doesn't look like the worst of the worst, but it is coming at a time. The solstice period is the time when the sun goes into a cardinal sign, and that can mean that there are more events occurring kind of like an outer sense. And so that could be a time when something happens, but let's hope it's not enough to be just completely disillusioning. But it could, in your own personal life, and because of the time of the season, things are built up like they're going to, make people permanently happy. And even if you love your family dearly, you realize you only have a certain amount of time with them before you go back to your adult life wherever you live, and it might be very far away from them. So I could see why that would feel kind of disillusioning, because you just get that nostalgic vibe going. Definitely with the moon in Cancer, there's nostalgia that can be um, coming out. And then Mercury is squaring Neptune, and that can lead to distorted thinking. That can lead to distorted hearing. Oh my gosh. Yesterday, my partner and I went to see this Picasso exhibit at the Art Institute of Chicago, and we were I went to get some coffee, and he wanted a smoothie, and I looked on Yelp for some places nearby, and I told him the address, and I repeated it to him, and he went in the opposite direction. And he actually did that twice for two different places. We were supposed to meet up someplace too. And I said to him it was Mercury retrograde, but it's just like not hearing what somebody is saying. It doesn't mean, we're not talking about somebody who's hard of hearing. We're talking about distorting the information that is heard. Sometimes this is a psychological mechanism or defense mechanism, I would say. If somebody has this in their natal chart, where they do it because they, had trauma that they couldn't handle. And so when they were picking up information, whether they were seeing something or they were hearing something, their mind tried to turn it into something that wasn't so painful. And that's kind of something that can occur as somebody is older. If you've ever observed this, I have the moon in Virgo, so I tend to like analyze things and observe people a lot and see how they behave. And I notice that some people, they have those rose-colored glasses. They should have rose-colored hearing aids, or whatever you want to call them, because that's how they perceive things. And it's like, no, that's not what that person meant. You're creating a false narrative because you want it to be like that. Or believing, nonsense, believing things are obvious lies because it placates the person and they can keep that fantasy going. These kinds of things are going to blow up. That's the word that just came to me. And people will no longer be able to kind of hide behind illusions. I mean, they can, but they're going to find it harder and harder to really have that kind of what's called consensus reality, or people enabling their delusions. Because really, I mean, that's what this world has come to at this point, and that's why it's like binge watching the Twilight Zone to live in this world, because it's just, there are people who are living in their own little worlds, and they might say another type of person's living in their world. And then there are the people who are seeing through deception, and the lies that are being told. And this can indicate more deception. With Mercury, we can be talking about the media. We can be talking about anything that is seeking to, create a certain narrative. But it won't happen forever. And then we have Mars squaring Neptune. Be careful about acting on information that you receive that could be distorted or downright false. And then because your emotions are riled up for God knows what reason, and even with Cancer, it can be patriotic reasons. It can be that you think that you're saving your country, you're helping your country. Be careful that you're not being manipulated into action that is of a deluded nature. And let's talk about some trines, for goodness sakes. Let's not talk about all the so-called negative things. The sun is trining Jupiter. I think this is good for prosperity, and I think I've heard that other whatever energy teachers or whatever you want to call them, channelers, say things like that as well. Moon is sextiling Jupiter because of these harmonious elements. I mean, the one interesting thing is that Jupiter is poised to go direct at the end of the month. So that is going to be a turning point as well going into the new year. And then Mercury goes direct in Sagittarius, the sign that Jupiter rules, a day later. So there you go. This full moon opposition between Cancer and Capricorn are occurring between signs that I consider to be quite traditional. Cancer, the fourth house, home and family, the mother. I think of June Cleaver, June Cleaver vibes. And then you have the moon. And by the way, if you're under 50, you might not even know what I'm talking about. The sun in Capricorn, the ruler of the 10th house, the father archetype. The career sector, your status in society and all of that. The authority figure. So this clash between home and the outer world is another theme that I think has been in place as well for the last few years, because especially in the first year when things shut down in March of 2020, home became so much more than it ever had, and for many years, because a lot of times, at least in the Western world, we have the man and the woman working, and in decades past, in the 50s, I grew up in the 70s, and that was the first decade when there were more and more women entering the workplace, and more children had to eat lunch at school. They couldn't go home for lunch. So this brought things full circle. And even, you had all you had both of the parents at home with the children. And I felt so good about that when I saw that, because I felt like it really was needed. It was something that shifted family dynamics, and it probably shifted it for the better. I know there were definitely some challenges with certain families being, locked up together, if you will, for lengths of time when they were so used to not being that way, being more fractured and being more independent. But I think it brought other people closer together. So, but we also have to look at since the sun is in Capricorn at this time, and since Pluto is in Capricorn, about this idea of tradition and authority and what it really means, because these things are being turned on their face. And in some cases, in America, for instance, there's been something about defunding the police, and people get outraged at that and say, how can you possibly want to have less police? Look at all the crime we have. We need more. We don't need less. And I certainly fell into that myself, of like thinking, wow, these people want anarchy in our streets and they want there to be crime to be rampant. And yeah, I mean, there might be some people with that kind of ulterior motives going on. But I also thought to myself, good, because I respect um, police officers, because I know that the vast majority of them are public servants trying to serve people. But I also know that we we are sovereign beings, and so we don't need people to rein us in. We don't, if we are acting in accordance with our own, um, God-given direction in life, and if we are under control. But the problem is that there are people who are not in control of their emotions and everything like that. So it's a very interesting thing that these systems are breaking down. The public school system, or even the private school system, the outer school system. You know, more and more people are opting out of that because of certain practices that have been occurring in the past years, not just few years, but you could say 10 or 20 years, that are not what they want. And that's so deeply ingrained to us that we send children to school, some outer schools, that becomes very challenging to face. All these institutions, the healthcare institution, um, government, governmental agencies, governments themselves, like, this is chaotic, but it may be a necessary chaos in order for us to, you know, go to a place where there is more individuality, more freedom, less control. So expect these themes to be front and center, especially since Pluto is at that 29th degree, and Pluto can be about power, and Capricorn is about authority. All right, let me see if there's anything else on the positive side that I want to mention. I think I'll leave it there. I hope that you enjoyed this, and uh, I hope everyone has a great holiday season, and that you ring in the new year happily and safely. Bye.